Hello, are you trying to clear the steel path? Well, look no further. This past week, I was finally able to set the time aside and finish the entirety of the steel path solo, and there are a lot of things that I have learned. So I've compiled a list of the best loadouts to use for all of these missions. Now, this is not to say that these missions can't be completed with other gear or other frames, because of course they can, but the gear that I use gave me literally no problems. It allowed me to be as lazy as humanly possible while still completing all of the objectives. So I think this is pretty useful information to know if you're new to Warframe or if you haven't decided to start doing Steel Path yet, so let's get started. I want to reiterate that this is not for farming things in the Steel Path. My main objective was to complete all of the missions as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So for your weapons, I'm going to recommend the Phantasma Prime. This works with any frame, it does a shitload of damage, and it is decent versus any faction or boss. Another solid option is the Ignis Wraith. This one is easier to use and can kill more enemies in a wider radius in exchange for a bit less damage per second, but if you can get your hands on a primary arcane, which you can pretty early on in the Steel Path, you put on primary merciless on this and it just shreds through everything. For your secondary, just use the Loadout. This thing is fuck broken. With and without its transformation, it just obliterates everything. The transform also gives you AoE, so it's pretty good for general use as well, but I do tend to be a little bit conservative because I want to save that AoE for when something very beefy gets in front of me. Speaking of which, for your melee, I recommend the Glaive Prime. This is mainly going to be used for, again, very beefy units like Eximus units, Disruption targets, Acolytes, but you're also mainly going to be using it in assassination missions to kill bosses like Vor, Lakrill, Vahek, Ambulus, etc. For your focus school, just use Xenoric. The energy region is a nice quality of life addition, and the tree just works on most frames. The only time you'll ever have to swap off of this tree to Madarai will be when you do Void Armageddon in the Zariman, but I will get to that later. For your Parazon, I also recommend that you use the Intruder, Auto Breach, and Untraceable mods. This will significantly decrease your mission time on spy and rescue missions, and there are just nice Parazon mods for overall quality of life while clearing the star chart, since you will be hacking quite a lot. The only pet I used during my clear of the Steel Path was the Panzer Vulpaphyla, since it's basically immortal, but you can honestly use the Spy Vulpaphyla or the Smita Kavad as well. I just don't recommend using Sentinels since they will randomly just get one-shot, and unless you have a specific Parazon mod, you don't have a way to bring them back, and we don't have space for that Parazon mod in our loadout right now. For your Operator, you don't really need to have a lot, but just have one decent amp like this one. It will serve you in almost all situations where you're going to need one, and I highly recommend using the Magus Lockdown Operator Arcane. This is mainly going to come in handy when dealing with demolishers in disruption missions or CCing enemies for some easy headshots to get your Loadout transformation. Now, unfortunately, you will have to do some Arcwing missions, but thankfully they are much lower level than regular Steel Path missions, and there aren't a lot of them. But for your Arcwing, just use the Amesha, okay? The Itzel is faster, but with the Amesha, you're never going to die, which means you're going to clear missions way faster. For your main Arcwing weapon, I recommend using the Kuvak Rattler. This thing is just really good for AoE, it's good as a heavy weapon, it's good for dealing with mobs, and it can do a decent amount of damage to tanky units as well, so just use this. But if you don't have it, or if you don't have all 5 Forma put into it like I do, you can also just use the Corvus Prime or the brand new Larkspur Prime. If you have to choose between those two, just use the Corvus. It has longer range, it's better for bosses, and it's also a lot easier to get. For your melee, it honestly does not matter at all, but the only good Arcwing weapons are the Prisma Veritux, which I know not everybody has, and the Centaur. So if you have the Veritux, use it. If you don't have it, use the Centaur. I don't even have mine completely modded, but like I said, it literally doesn't matter. Other than that, just make sure you have some ciphers and some energy pads in case you ever get into a tight spot. Like if you randomly die, you can just pop a pad and get your energy back up to full. Do keep in mind there is a 1-minute cooldown between the use of pads though. And me personally, I spammed all of my ciphers because I could not be bothered to hack that much. I already play on like 1.2 seconds or 1.5 seconds of input delay since I play on my PS4 through a capture card to my PC. So Grenier hacks are a fucking nightmare. So just keep some in stock, and you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna be hacking a lot, so this is gonna save you a lot of time. Alright, now that we've gotten all the general gear info out of the way, let's talk about specifically the warframes you should be using for all these different mission types. I've made a cute little spreadsheet here with all the mission types and the recommended frames, so it's much easier for you to see. But as you can see, Revenant, Mesa, and Wukong are leading the pack in almost every regard. The reason I recommend Revenant for these specific missions is that all of them either the main objective is to kill one tanky thing, or the objective is time-based and does not require you to kill enemies. So when you're playing Revenant, you really have to try hard to die. So you just pop your Mesmer skin, and you can just stand in front of a boss and just shoot at them until they die, basically. For general enemies, you can just press your 1, and they will literally just fight amongst themselves for an entire minute straight, which completely de-aggroes them from you, and most importantly, the main objective. They're gonna fight each other and ignore the excavator, ignore the mobile defense target, the Rania crystal, etc. Also, with Roar Subsumed, you can make your damage absolutely ludicrous versus enthralled enemies, basically one-shotting almost all of them with your Reeve. Next, I have Saren listed for Exterminates and the Infested Salvage mission. Saren is great for Exterminates, especially Corpus Exterminates, since you can just pop your 3, use the Ignis Wraith, and the toxin damage bypasses their shields, and they just die. But you can honestly use almost anyone for Exterminate. I also tried out Gyre, Mesa, Revenant, but I had the easiest, fastest, and most brain-dead time with Saren. For hijack missions, Hildryn is the obvious pick. You do not need to kill any enemies, you literally just sit on top of the thing and spam pillage. You will never run out of shields, you will never die, and the objective will never stop. Okay, so she's the best pick by far. I also tried out Trinity and other frames, but she was just completely brain dead for these missions. For interception missions, I basically exclusively recommend Korra. Zephyr works fine as well, but Korra can have up to 2 Strangledomes at a time, which lets her control 2 interception points without her even being there, which lets you capture 1 point and then fight the other. And to be honest, Soul Steel Path interception missions are the worst thing in this game. This is the build that I use for Soul Steel Path interception on Korra. It focuses on max range and duration because you are not actually looking to kill enemies. You will have to shoot at some Eximus units to get rid of their overguard, but you're mainly just going to keep enemies locked down for as long as possible with your 4. You're not going to let them escape and they won't be able to capture the points. That's it. Try not to kill the Eximus so that more don't spawn, but if you do, that's fine. Like I said, you just get rid of their overguard and that allows them to be yoinked up by your 4. So that's it. You basically just pop your 4 down on 2 points and then just jump back and forth, recapturing and capturing them until you finish the first rotation, and then you can get the hell out of there. Now we have Wukong. So Wukong's Cloudwalker is the GOAT. I barely have my Wukong built, so I mainly used him for completing missions that had a quick objective. Spawn, get some energy, and then just fly through the tile set with Cloudwalker, complete the objective, and fly back out. So he's great for captures, sabotage, rescue. They're all super easy, and spy missions especially are a breeze with him compared to other frames because you can just use your Cloudwalker to go through lasers and it doesn't even detect you. Now finally we have Mesa, and Mesa is very good at killing a lot of things in a large area very quickly. She is hands down my go-to pick for open world missions, defense, and even disruption missions. You can actually use her in most situations where you would use Revenant, but if you're playing Mesa in those situations, you actually have to play the video game. With Revenant you can basically go AFK, which is why I have him recommended over her in those mission types. But because Thralls have a mind of their own, they can be pretty annoying when it comes to actually getting a lot of kills very quickly, like in defense mode, so you just put Pillage on Mesa and she can do well versus any faction. I also use Mesa for all of the Zeraman mission types, aka Void Flood, Void Cascade, and Void Armageddon. The only change that you have to do to your loadout is swap Zenarik to Maturai. You don't actually need Maturai for Flood or Cascade, but the added amp damage for Thrax enemies is pretty useful. However, for Void Armageddon specifically, Maturai is almost basically required, because the Ravenous Void Angel that spawns at the end of a rotation has an insanely tanky shield. So with Void Strike, it is super easy to take it down, otherwise it takes way too long to do solo. And those are my suggestions. If you guys want to clear Steel Path the easiest way possible, here you have the answer. And I want to reiterate again that this is not a farming guide. This is mainly a guide to clear the Steel Path as lazily, as efficiently, and as quickly as possible. Let me know if there's any builds you would like for me to discuss more in depth in other videos, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below or reach out to me on Discord. My DMs are always open on Discord, or join my Discord server. Link to my Discord is in the video description of all of my videos. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.